Hello, guys, and welcome to Mark Tully the Vernal, a spoken journal where we talk about real life situations, mental health, and personal development tools that you can use to overcome them and reach your full potential. Brilliant day today. I'm really excited. I have on a good friend of mine, Tim Buxton. Tim Buxton is a very impressive man. In fact, he's been an international humanitarian for over 20 years. He's a motivational speaker, a thought leader, a keynote speaker in courageous leadership. He's also a founder for a not-for-profit called You Belong, and he's done a TED Talk as well before. Is it just one, Tim, or more?
Just the one so far.
Just one. Just one. Just one. As if as if you can put the just in there. No, but Tim is here to talk to us about PTSD to post-traumatic growth. Did I get that right?
Yeah, nailed it.
Nice one. How are you, Tim?
Mark, thanks for the generous, kind introduction. Yeah, it's so good to be on your podcast, man. I've listened to several episodes and honored to be among the guests.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, mate. Since the day I met you, you've been a big inspiration to me and shown me this stuff that I'm doing is very possible. And yeah, here we are. How amazing is that?
Mate, you're a seasoned podcaster now. Watch out.
We're getting there. No Joe Rogan yet, but we'll see. Maybe next week.
Yeah. Hey, there's always going to be someone next, right? So why not you?
Well, this is it, isn't it? This is it. So, Tim, I'd like to tell you, to tell us a little bit about your story and where the PTSD comes from to start with, I think.
Okay. Well, the genesis of PTSD, I will say that, labels for me are always difficult, but they're helpful, right? They're helpful for us to just kind of get a general understanding of maybe what we're talking about. And post-traumatic stress disorder really is something that I think was highlighted in my life and when I came back from living in the Middle East. It was a family. I've got 4 kids at the moment, but 3 of our young children and my wife were living in northern Iraq. And as you said in the intro, most people, when they hear that you were living in northern Iraq, oh, you served in the army and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, actually, no, I wasn't there as a member of the military. I didn't carry a gun. I didn't own a gun. I was there, to be honest, to help the victims of those that were fighting in the several conflicts that were occupying that region at the time. And so, you get to see the best and the worst in the role that I had, leading, I was country director in Iraq for a non-profit organization called World Orphans. So we were serving vulnerable communities, and that, in particular, when we landed there was the day ISIS invaded. So we were actually, so we were there the day ISIS crossed the border into Iraq from Syria, and suddenly the world found out who this radical group was, right? They'd be operating as a pretty small little group in Syria. There's still loads of little groups like that happening to this day, and what you're seeing on the news with the overthrow of Assad recently is highlighting a lot of squabbles between various factions and military groups that are trying to wrestle for power. Well, they decided to branch out and go to Mosul, which is right across the border and about 50 kilometers from the airport that our family flew into that day on June 9th, 2014. And it just so happens that Mosul crumbled within a few hours, and 2 million people fled that city fearing for their lives and came across the border to where we were. And we spent the next 3.5 years serving the victims of various genocide and displacement. Saw a lot, obviously caring for my family whilst also caring for many of those that had lost everything, wives, daughters that were kidnapped, family members brutally murdered. And you don't have to see it, though we did see enough. But you, on a day-to-day basis, hearing everyone's story and feeling at times the weight of the world on your shoulders to try and do something about it, took its toll on me after, a good 3.5 years. And when we came back to Australia, and the hardest thing was we had to evacuate ourselves a couple of times. The last time we left with just 12 hours notice, my wife was pregnant with number 4 who came along, our little one August, who's now 6. But we managed to get the last flight that flew out of that airport for 6 months. So we managed to, we kind of had to leave everything behind, the work that we'd built there, and without really saying goodbye to anybody. And when the dust settled and I got back to Australia, I was pretty cooked, right? And I think I couldn't really handle not living at a high pace. And so I'm living up here all the time, and everyone else around, if you know what Australia's like, it's pretty chill. And I was on the Sunshine Coast, Australia, when we first came back for a little bit, and it was like, my body was just used to cortisol and adrenaline running through my body, like just on a normal basis. And so, it kind of messed up, life and rhythms. But that's when I discovered what PTSD was, not just in the people I was helping over there, because it was quite obvious with the extreme trauma that they had gone through, but I was seeing probably a more chronic PTSD, rather than acute surface in my life,
Yeah, wow, what an incredible story. I'm just wondering, so that would have been some crazy situations that really would have been the triggers of the PTSD, right?
Look, so many. I mean, just from thinking about your own family, again, within a few months, I remember one time I was driving into the city, Erbil, which is about a 2-hour drive from where our home was. Our home, fortunately, was about 150 kilometers from Mosul, but through 3 mountain ranges, 7 army checkpoints. I mean, you felt a real sense of security. There's a proverb that the Kurdish people have, which occupied this region of Iraq, and it's the mountains are our only friends, right? Because they've been betrayed by so many people groups. They're the largest people group in the world. 50 million approximately, some would say, Kurdish people occupying parts of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and yet they don't even have their own country, right? So twice the size, almost twice the size of Australia in population, but don't have their own country. So they've been betrayed historically, and so these mountains we were living in gave us a sense of security. But I remember driving into the city Erbil, as I usually do, once a week, once every 2 weeks, to get supplies that wasn't always available in our town we were living in. And it was like deadly quiet. I'm like, dude, why is there nobody? Feels like there's nobody here. I was doing my shopping at the mall, got some supplies, started to drive back, and I got back at home, and it was like internet wasn't working, all the social medias were shut down, and apparently there was I guess false reports that ISIS had invaded that city at that moment. Like they'd kind of made a further advance into our region, and I had no clue. So everyone was kind of like had done a runner, but I really was clueless to the fact until I got back home. It turned out not to be the truth, but you're constantly living with a sense of volatility, like anything at any moment could change, despite feeling extremely safe and secure in where we were. You just knew you had to be prepared and ready to so there's that general constant on edge. My wife would get a little bit scared every now and then if she'd see things that just didn't seem right. And, you, as a guy, you want to make sure she feels safe, and the children really had no clue what's going on. And then you had to, at one point, and we were told by our organization, you have to leave. Like they'd made significant advances in and around where we were strategically that put us in a vulnerable position. But the worst thing is we were getting directives from the US, where our organization was based, to tell us what to do when we felt we were in a better position to know what to do. And essentially what they asked us to do was just get out of the country. And the only way we could do that was drive across the border. At the time, flights were being cancelled. And we had to drive towards Syria and straddle the Syrian border, get over the Turkish border, right where Syria, Turkey, and Iraq converge, and drive until we could get to the nearest city that we could fly out of in Turkey. And so that was a 12-hour taxi ride with a complete stranger, and going towards ISIS, essentially, to get out. And it was like it was August at the time, so middle of dead heat of summer, 50 degrees, just absolutely sweating. And I had like imagine a little like a Toyota Corolla, and 3 kids, 5 of us, so 6 in total, the taxi driver, my wife in the front, and me and the 3 kids in the back with whatever we had, backpacks and stuff thrown in, and a stroller in the trunk, whatever we could fit. And it was that experience alone, man, was like just an experience. But man, I could rattle off so many things that we went through, some of which you just forget until people start asking you questions and stories. So
yeah, it's like that, isn't it? How things get buried in your memories, in your mind. What, it's crazy stories and situations. You've told me some as well before.
yeah.
What would you say was one or even the main things about yourself that got you through? Like, what did you draw on within Tim?
I would say one, I'm really culturally experienced. I was born in Indonesia, and my parents are British. I spent, before moving to Iraq, I'd spent many years in, I've traveled and worked in over 30 countries. I've traveled to about 60, but worked in around over 30 countries in various conflicts and disasters around the world. And so I think being able to adapt to and to effectively communicate, not just verbally, but in nonverbal contexts within various cultures, is one super helpful. I think I'm generally a pretty friendly guy, and so I use that to just be a kind of disarming in that sense. I think disarming kind of personality probably helps. And I think lastly, I'm actually really stubborn and maybe determined. I just I'll persevere through a lot, especially if I've got purpose and I set my mind to something, which has its downsides. The best thing I ever did was marry my incredible wife, who is an expert in herself in doing the work we've done. However, she's a lot more grounded and will tame the ego in me to help me realize there's sometimes it's okay to surrender, give up. You don't have to give in to what is deep down inside you, but sometimes that little battle you can just give up for the greater fight. So, yeah.
So just at the end of that there, thank you for sharing that. But just at the end of that there, I'm hearing that like you get locked in on something and you're stubborn and determined and you don't know when to pivot. Is that what you're saying? When to change it up, when to move on to the next idea?
I think it takes maturity to let go of things. Even conversations you might have. What it's like when you get locked in with somebody. And you're like, hey, this isn't going anywhere. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just walk away and not. And the hard thing is I always want things to end in a certain way, and there's lots in life you just can't control the outcome. And so I think learning to know that maybe you've given your best shot, and there's things that on any given day it might have worked, but for reasons out of your control, it's just time to move on. So and I think that can be really hard for me, because I get I get quite engaged with things.
Becomes personal.
Yes, it does. Oof. Ouch.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good example of how. So I think that's probably. Well, I doubt it's uncommon with people in general, but I'd say it's very common in men to get that determined stubbornness and not. So it's a really good example how men and women operate well together, and that we need each other.
Yeah, and I think you've nailed it. I think there's so many qualities within the masculine and the feminine that complement each other so well. And I would say I think there's quite often the word strong attached to a masculine, but the strength within the feminine, I think, is equally valid. And there's a strength to surrendering, letting go. Like there's a trust almost, like, hey, I'll tell you a story. I think the only way I can explain is this: like when it was time for us to leave, when there was fears of another one of those kind of invasions in a city nearby us, where a radical Islamic, not Sunni group, which was ISIS, but a Shia group, so a different kind of radical group. Again, I wouldn't put the emphasis on the religious, but more the ideology. And so this ideology, this group called the Hajj Shabi, were in Iran actually, and we lived 20 miles from the Iranian border, and there was fears that they'd kind of come across into a city nearby us, as a result of the Kurds, as I explained earlier, wanting their own independence. This region that they were in was an autonomous state. Think of like the Kashmir region or the West Bank and Gaza. It was like an autonomous state, but not recognized as its own country. And they actually had their own referendum, which they were really proud of, and 99% voted to leave Iraq. But no one there. That was it. That referendum just set off every other country in the region. Iran, Baghdad, Syria, and Turkey all closed the borders. And suddenly we had we were told, like, all the borders are closed. The only way in and out will be this flight, this day that will be the last day the airport will be operating. So we had to decide, are we going to... My wife was pregnant. We planned to go back to Australia to have the baby in a couple months. So we thought, well, it's time to... We're going to have to go now because we won't be able to go back to have the baby. And again, we didn't know really what would be the result, whether it was another false kind of flag warning or whatever. So we jumped on... I was wrestling what to do, and my wife just sat with me on the end of the bed, and she just looked at me and she said, "Tim, proud of you, but it's time to go." And I knew it. I knew it days ago. We'd been struggling with lots of other things that just were really hard. I was crying, I was bawling, I was a mess. And she goes, "Tim, you are so good at everything you've done. whatever you do next, whatever is coming next, you're going to be amazing. And in that moment, it was like there's strength to just trust that
Yeah, I love that.
there's something incredible coming up, but you can't, that analogy, you can't hold on to what's next if you've got a clenched fist.
But
yeah.
the next few words to give you inspiration and realization just to go on to the next thing and be great at that as well. Yeah,
Because it's unknown, right? You have no idea. You think this is what's defined you for the last 3 years, and people are proud of what you've accomplished. You're proud, and you're having to suddenly, you didn't get to choose to let this go. It's just, it's over now, and it's hard.
You told that story so well. I felt like I was there. I was gone. I wasn't in Sydney anymore. I was there in the tent watching.
Man, I was there. I was there again. Every time I tell it, I'm grateful I have that story because it's a reminder again,
Yep. Yeah, it is very captivating and impressive for sure. I love hearing all about it every time you do tell me stories of this place. And what you got up to and all the humanitarian deeds and the contribution you made to the world. It's brilliant to hear all about it. So that's like PTSD and where it would come from, understandably. Now, the post-traumatic growth, I've never even heard of that before. And I purposely did not ask you about it because I want to learn as the listeners are learning at the same time. So, and we speak regularly, just for the listeners, by the way. So I had ample opportunity to ask him and I just didn't. So, yeah, tell us all about it, please.
So PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you think of it, like there's a graph, right? You're trucking along in life, and you're not just cruising like this, but you're kind of like a little going up and down, maybe a little spike there, a bit down here, but generally, you're doing good. And then for a lot of people, they have a extremely traumatic experience, right? And boom, they take a dive, like a big dive. We're talking, you have the house burns down, like assault, something really life-threatening and scary, right? And so you're kind of cruising now down here for a little bit, right? And most people will be like, well, the goal really is to get you back to where you were, right, before, and that journey back up requires like all this counseling, support, help here, there, and everywhere. But what's people are starting to discover in the psychological world, this is probably about 10, 15 years ago, is that, we've heard statements like, well, what doesn't kill you can make you better, or doesn't, break you makes you better, right? That they discovered, there's some people that go through this trauma and then on the other side of it, it's like they're a transformed person. They're like, it was that trauma that actually was the catalyst. Now, I'm sure everyone that goes through something like that would never wish that they had to go through it again, but they were able to respond in a way that enabled them to grow through the trauma. And so instead of going back to zero, it's like beyond zero and baseline. And so there are studies into what are the characteristics that is there common characteristics? Is this just chance that this happens to people? Are there actually qualities that actually can be cultivated to enable you to grow through trauma? And there in fact are.
Really interesting. And I can relate and I actually have a lot to say about that. But I have a question first, another question, and then I'll tell you what I'm wanting to add. This research, is it in an adult who's already established in life, then they go down and back up? Or would it, because I was 6.5 when mine started, right? So I wouldn't say that I was up to any point of a human yet, because your brain's not even developed properly, you know what I mean? You're still learning how to live.
Yes.
So for me, it would have been like, obviously happy child. Like my mother was nanny in Kinross House, which is where they had last 2 Tina Parks. a big fancy house in Scotland. So point is, clearly a very impressive mother, and then, or a very good mother. And then yeah, I was 6.5. Her sister was murdered, my auntie, and my mother became suicidal, chronically depressed. And she's still here today, thank fuck. I love my mum. Yeah, like there was three of us. I'm the youngest. My dad held us. My dad's my hero. He held everything together. He worked on the farm, looked after the three kids. My oldest sister, Kirsty, she chipped in as well. I think she would have been like 10. But this went on sort of 4 years. Yeah, 4 or 5 years. And then we moved to Coldstream when I was 10 or 11. But yeah, it was rough, man. And then, like, it's funny you say PTSD from that, yeah, for sure. And then in my therapy, I found out I got complex PTSD as well from the bullying at school, which I didn't think was that much of a problem because I don't like admitting it. I hate being a victim because I've always been a warrior, you know what I mean? Whether it's in my head or on the streets, like I've always, done whatever I could to stick up for myself and other people and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's so interesting because what I'm doing now, when I did a post, I think when I qualified from the Jay Shetty School of Life Coaching, I put a post up and it said, yeah, I've been put 300 hours in the last 9 months or whatever it was. And it's like, but to be honest with you, this is 35 years in the making. 36 now, but I was 35. I was young then. Because that's what it's from, right? Like I was always very good at being empathetic growing up because I've been through a lot of shit and it doesn't have to be the same, right? Like everyone's situation is always going to be unique. There's only 4 trauma responses, right? You know what I mean? Fight, flight, fear, and fawn. Freeze and fawn, sorry, not fear. Whoops. And yeah, so like you can relate to someone's experiences without actually needing to feel what they're feeling because you've felt something similar in a different situation, right? So I'm very good at being empathetic. I've never really been sympathetic. I think if I hadn't been through what I'd been through, I would feel other people's pain. Because that's the difference, right? Empathy is putting yourself in their shoes and understanding to an extent, obviously. You can't understand because you're not them, but you can get their point. And then sympathetic would be taking it on board and feeling their pain. Whereas I'm really good at not doing that. I think, well, my therapist told me as well that it's a, emotional responsibility, she called it. Everyone has to be emotionally responsible for themselves. And that allows you to not be sympathetic because there's two things you're not doing. You're not being emotionally responsible for yourself, and you're not letting them be emotionally responsible for themselves either. Or you're not respecting the fact that everybody should be emotionally responsible for themselves. Like so Marianne from horse timing back in Scotland, she's an absolute legend. Yeah. She was explaining it in the context of if you're a therapist and one of your clients takes their own life, right? So it's like the therapist needs to understand that everybody's emotionally responsible for themselves, so they don't take that on board. Because if you start taking that stuff on board, that'd be very rough and terrible for the mental health of the therapist, for sure. I am not a therapist, and the way I am at the minute, I'm really loving the personal development and life transformation and things like this. The coaching side of that is incredible. I did think I'd go into therapy, but to be honest with you, it's heavy. I mean, I do speak to clients about their trauma and stuff like that, but and it's a lot more learning. Like I'd have to go to university for a start and do for the first time in my life and do 4 years minimum, probably 6 years. Yeah. But
some of these, some of them bleed
my,
into the other, don't they? The therapy and the cancer a little bit.
If you're capable, you're capable. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what courses you've done. Like I'm doing NLP now, and you'll always be who you are as a coach. That's why I don't mind. People say the market's saturated. I'm like, not even close. I don't mind as well. I've had fellow life coaches on my podcast. I'm going to get more on. I don't mind standing shoulder to shoulder to them. I mean, you're a coach as well in a different aspect, but I think we're all standing shoulder. None of us are in competition because whoever wants to be coached by me will be coached by me because they'll relate to me. You know what I mean? That's why it's such an amazing situation because I just get to be myself because that's the point, right? And that's who I'm going to relate to. And that's like my target market's essentially me and the younger me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically tradies, and there's a lot of them, and yeah, tradies that want a better life essentially. They might not even know, but yeah, that my point was, I think exactly what you're saying, like from the PTSD and stuff, and then the growth from that, because there's a drive never to go back there, right?
Yeah.
That's a drive, and then there's a drive to help others because you know how fucking shit it was and how rough it was, and at times I didn't want to be here, and
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's and I'm in such a good place now. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm all the way up here compared to where I was. You know what I mean? You can't even see me anymore, and I'm just like, fuck, I want to help other people, you know? And yeah,
Yeah.
and again, it's also adding to me. I'm not even reached my full potential yet, and it adds to me so much when a client turns around and says, "Oh, you've empowered me to transform my own life," or "I don't recognize my life," because that's empowerment, right? Like I would never want to a client to ever think that I did it, because you can't. Like I tell my clients this all the time as well. It's a partnership. You know, it's all about how they respond. It's like it's really it's on them so much. Back to the emotional responsibility, right? It's on all of us to look after ourselves, because we're the only person who can. Because you're the only person that knows yourself that well,
You know,
or capable of.
yeah. Well, as it sounds like you had to get to know yourself, or you had to assume a huge amount of responsibility quite early on. And I think at the beginning you were saying, was it just adults, or is this something that can be exhibited early on? And I think, having heard your story a fair bit too, we got some pretty good time together, 3 full days in a pretty intense experience, personal growth, ourselves, and getting to know you, the guy I sat next to from day one,
Yeah,
and we were like buddies the whole few days. You've had to grow. You're almost forced to grow, right? And
mm.
I think in a way, um, I wanted to answer your question. I don't know if the research spent a lot of time, you know, researching or surveying children. I know that there's a lot of extensive research out there now, so I'm sure it would be there. But I think there's and you mentioned a couple PTSDs, which I thought I hadn't heard of, complex PTSD. But I think so often we think of it has to be an acute traumatic one event kind of thing that triggers something, and I think there's chronic PTSD, which I would say I was more of a victim of. It was just a relentless, ongoing kind of, you think of kids that have neglected being loved and touched, held from the time that they were born, and that's depriving of what every child needs to survive, sense. And if we deprive that over a long period of time, I mean, there's going to be a high level of traumatic stress that
Yeah, sure.
isn't can't be pointed down to this happened and I've got the battle scars of what I went through. So I think you've exhibited that. But my question, I guess, to you is essentially like, when did you feel like you were able to peak beyond, go get to a point where I'm growing through this, not just surviving or maintaining status quo?
It's a really good question. When did I feel? I, you know what? It was probably only about 2 years ago, because I didn't even know what it was until I started getting therapy, which was only 2 years ago. The reason I got therapy was, or started it, well, there was several reasons, obviously, um, but it was like, my life's amazing, right? I got all the tools you want, toys you want, and two motorbikes and whatever, blah blah blah, paddle boards. It's just I do what I want, you know what I mean? And then working as an electrician in Sydney, like as a child, I was like, the life I live now was like the dream life. It wasn't too much. Didn't want too much. We grew up poor. Teaches the value of a pound and the value of people and the value of the things that really matter, right? So we were like, I was just, I just want to be comfortable and do what I want. I was probably actually living. I remember the conversation with my oldest sister, and I was probably living a better life than what I said I wanted, right? As a child. I've got amazing friends here in Sydney. Love yous all. And back home, even closer friends, because just this time is more double, you know what I mean? Like, you can't, there's no replacement for that, the shit that we've been through. And they would have been there when I was like partying and fighting and in the full trauma response, thought I was a crazy hard man or whatever, whatever it was, mental. And this is standard, by the way. I'm not nothing special. This is standard for like where we live in Scotland, or probably the whole of it, and yeah, not the top of England as well. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think shit was that bad, and I was like, I'll go and speak to her. Speak to a couple of friends back home who'd been using them, and they'd transformed their lives.
Yeah.
And it told me how amazing it was, and I was like, oh fuck yeah, that sounds good. Because sometimes I would just feel horrendous. I remember one time I thought the sofa, I was going to fall through the sofa, and it was on the second floor. I was going to fall into the ground. It was a physical feeling. I was like, fuck. And I phoned my mate, text my mate, come over, pick me up, and went for some food and that, and just I calmed down. It was fine, but I was like, what is this? Like, you know, I've got human connection and no like money worries, because I used to always be stressed about money back home, even though I was on the good wages, boss, electrical department, but it was just credit cards and all sorts of things, and not the avoidance of trauma, right? Every addiction is avoidance of trauma, and I definitely had a weekend addiction to partying and getting fucked up, and it was just pushing all the emotions away that I didn't. I didn't even know I was pushing away from the truth. I didn't know what was going on. So I went and spoke to, it was, like I said before, Mary Ann, lovely lady in Scotland. Within half an hour, she's like, oh yeah, you've definitely got PTSD and abandonment issues because my mother being suicidal. That makes you, as it for a child, that's like abandonment, emotional
Yeah.
abandonment, even though
Absolutely.
she was there, but she wasn't there. Like, she was not a person, you know. It's just or she literally wasn't there because she might have been sectioned, you know. But yeah, it was it's terrifying what it can do to a person.
For a child, yeah, especially,
And
you know.
knowing what I know now, and understand that it was not the incident.
Mm.
People die all the time, right? Murder is obviously worse, but like a lot of people would be able to take that and, you know, pick themselves back up within whatever space of time. I can't put a number on that because everyone's different, you know, and go on with
Yeah.
life, right? Like, but because that side of the family, they were all sort of, I don't know to the extent of it, and I'm not even going to talk about it because it's not my place, but they were neglected in some way, or, you know, they had a bit of a rough upbringing. So the trauma from that was triggered, and it just goes boom, because it's like, you know, it's like when the tap's stuck and the rubber pops open and it fucking all comes flooding through, or the tomato sauce when you're smacking the arse of it, and then the whole lot comes through, or you're pouring the salt and the top falls off and the whole thing goes on your food. It's like that for a person, which was really interesting for me to learn. And yeah, I actually, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I fell in love with human psychology and how your mind works, and how you would, like on the abandonment thing, I even figured this out myself and told my therapist the next week, and she agreed, and I was buzzing.
Wow.
This is how mental it got, right? At one point, I remember getting really anxious and nervous about something, and she got me reassociated with those kind of feelings, the negative ones and stuff, because I was disassociated. My body was just blocking them out essentially. And I remember getting really feeling like terribly anxious and whatever about, I can't even remember what the situation was, but then I got excited at the same time because I was halfway through my therapy, and I was like, I knew these like supposedly negative feelings, right? On the other side, when I figured it all out, there's going to be like this big epiphany and it's like aha moment. So I was feeling terrible and I got excited about it, and I was like, fuck, is something wrong with me? But you know what that is? That's passion, mate. That is.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because it's like, and I was thinking about this the other day, it's like nobody pays anybody for knowledge nowadays, right? Because you can just Google it or chat GPT it. You know what I mean? Knowledge is let's face it, right? You can go and learn. You could force yourself to learn about whatever you want. Like, say, for example, someone says, go and learn about a subject that you don't like. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm not even going to give an example, and I'll pay you $1 million. Anybody could go and learn anything, right? Nowadays. No problem. Because there's so much information out there. You probably wouldn't even need to pay for a course, but you could do if you wanted. But this is it. That's why people get coaches. That's why people pay for courses, because the person teaching or the person guiding you or the person being your coach is passionate about the situation. I literally listen to some sort of podcast or read a book, or that's a bit of a lie. I actually hardly read at all, but I'm trying to get into it, or do like experiment with some sort of like meditation or something every day. So I'm passionate about it and I love it and I get really involved in it. So that's why my clients like getting coached from me, because I'll have loads of information. I'll pull all the information I can out of them. And then when they have a aha moment and a breakthrough, I'll be like, do you understand what's happening there in your head, in your body or whatever? And if they don't, then I'll ask if they want to understand more. And yeah, they nearly always do. In fact, I always do. I've never had anybody say no. So I explain it more. And then, so they've had their breakthrough. It's really important not to steal them from people by like, just trying to give the information away. Okay, it is hard. I have to bite my tongue at times. But
you do a great job, mate. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of your coaching and support, and we still continue to meet together, and I think what does make you really effective is, one, you doing the work yourself, and the minute you're trying to get work from somebody, you've done the work, right? You've transformed a life and traversed what most young men your age haven't worked through. However, you're not resting on your laurels, right? You're still doing the work. And I think that you said something about awareness, like I was aware at this point suddenly. And I think that's the joy, isn't it, of the self-discovery growth, is it's the knowledge isn't out there, it's the knowledge is in here. And you're going to need somebody, a trusted person that's going to guide you at times through that process of self-discovery and self-growth and what was the word you came up with? Self-spire.
Self-spire, yeah. Using yourself to inspire yourself. Yeah. I should post that video, actually.
You should. Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. It's, I don't like it. I watched it and I cringed because I thought I was all like confident and thingy. Then I watched the video and I'm like, I'm still nervous and shit.
Oh, man.
Okay. So enough about me, Tim. You're here to be interviewed, but oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you want to know a couple of the things that they actually have discovered? They discovered like a dozen of these characteristics that you can cultivate, and it will lead you to be able to activate, I would say, post-traumatic growth. And when we discovered, so a real good friend of mine, two friends of mine, actually psychologists, worked together to create a program for refugees, and they piloted that program with us, a post-traumatic growth program, because they took the top 5 characteristics and they put it together in a real interactive kind of group program. So it's not like a one-on-one kind of counseling program, but it's a group course that we delivered. We were the first pilot program to deliver into the refugees that we ended up providing housing and education and medical care for, and we saw a phenomenal response through it. So I can give you a bit of a we can touch on one or two of them or go over wherever you want with that.
Yeah, for sure. If you've got time, we'd like to hear all about what they found and what's the methods and tools, whatever you want to call them, to actually activate this.
Yeah, and not a lot of it's not rocket science, but I think the particular application really relates to to those that are in this place. The first one goes without saying. It's gratitude, right? And I think anyone can learn to be more grateful. It's a tool. It's a muscle, right? All of these things I'd actually say are muscles in your body that if you use it, you'll grow and get bigger and stronger, but they all there and exist. And it's whether you're using it. And gratitude, for them, it looked like, well, you can be looking at everything you've lost. From many of the families, they'd lost their wife and their daughters were in captivity with ISIS. And, 2 years later and still lost. So even to this day, there's about 2,000 women that are still unaccounted for, that were captured. So still living in a sense of, are they dead now, or are they just still being used as slaves? And yet within our camp, and we could compare those that were in what we called a micro-refugee village. We worked with the local government and built these small little micro-villages, about 150, about 20 families that were related, all lived together in these incredible places. When you compared what they went through and how they responded to the people that we knew were working in 20,000 refugee camps that were still in tents and still depending on everyone for everything, whereas ours were, getting local jobs in the community and rebuilding their lives. But what they were able to tap into and what we were able to teach them was this idea of, you got to focus on what you do have. You might have lost everything, but you're still here. You might have lost, but your wife or your daughters, but look at the family that is right in front of you that are with you. And that ability to be grateful, obviously goes without saying. So that was number one. And number two, interestingly enough, was a belief or a faith in this context, because we were working in a very religious context in the Middle East. It's very religious. It was a belief in a God or a power, or a higher power, right? Yep. That actually cares or is for you. Some people might say, "Oh, the universe, right, is for me." A benevolent, basically a belief in a benevolent world. And imagine that. Like, imagine if, this happened to me because I deserved it. It's punishment. It's when you get in that mindset, which is so easy, especially if you are religious, the first thing you're going to ask is why. And even if you're not religious, the first thing that happens, people do, when they're on a plane and they've never prayed a prayer in their life, suddenly they start praying just in case, that something greater than themselves could somehow do some miracle, right?
I've not believed in God my whole life, 40 years. Plane's going to crash. Oh, please, God.
Yeah. Suddenly you see everyone praying, like, if he works, I'm in, whatever. But again, the point is, do you believe the world's conspired against you, or are you going to choose to believe that the world is got your back? And that I think is a huge thing. I mean, I grew up quite religious, and in many ways, I think there was aspects of the religious beliefs I guess I inherited by default, which actually kind of pulled me down. The whole, like, you're a sinner and you're a worm, and just so lucky that God loves you. And again, that was just probably an unhealthy side of the coin that I had to wrestle with, even my own belief systems and ways of thinking. And so, yeah, we kind of tackled that in the course. And then because you got to meet people where they're at. If they're not deeply religious, but again, they're philosophically, we all have these existential questions about life. And I think these are really important places to work through, and the third was a hope, and it wasn't. It was defined. It redefined. This isn't like wishful thinking. It's actually an internal hope rather than an external hope. Like hope can be like,
I like this.
Hope can be, if only, we were living in instead of living in a tent, we were living in a concrete building. If only we weren't stuck here in Iraq, but we had made it out to Europe. If only, blah, blah, blah. The if onlys, your circumstance, if only I had bought my own home and I wasn't still renting. If only, I got a better job instead of this crummy job I've got right now. If only I could actually find my wife, a partner for life. If only, this kind of wishful thinking on circumstances, right? Well, hope, is like blowing hot air into a balloon, all it doesn't take much and it'll pop. Whereas, real authentic hope doesn't depend on the circumstances. It's something. It's got an internal locus of control, and it's imagine filling that same balloon instead of with water, but instead of with air, filling that balloon with water. You can actually take that same balloon that you filled with water, and you can hold a flame to that balloon. And what would have popped that balloon? Now that flame will not pop. That balloon will not pop for about 15, 20 seconds. That flame can be on that balloon with water in it. And it's an internal belief and confidence.
I was about to say that, because hope is actually the last negative sort of on like the spectrum. I can't remember what this was, but I remember really liking it one day when somebody was like, hope is actually like the last negative sort of framework in language, because it's a bit desperate, whereas if you start to say, when I do this, or not, I hope I'll be able to do this. It's like when I get these many people, or when it happens, or when I create this, or like all those more positive words, like it's gonna happen, or it's and So that's why I was interested where that was going. But when you change the hope, like internal hope, and then that becomes self-belief. Yeah, for sure.
It's that self-spy. It's an anchor. Hope, I think, actually becomes more of an anchor than it becomes attached to a expectation. Like an expectation, it has to look like this. Whereas hope becomes more a purpose, a reason. And I can live with purpose and reason, but if I'm living that it has to have a certain expectation, an external thing, and then when that doesn't realize, suddenly everything's shattered. But when I've got something that's beyond an expectation. But I would say, don't live with expectations, live with expectancy. In that subtle difference there is, I have expectancy, but I'm not going to lock it into an expectation. Expectations, I think, are just resentments waiting to happen. So you probably want to have a few of those and just live life with expectancy, a belief that, life is full of ups and downs, but, I haven't missed a meal. Can't think of the time I missed a meal because I didn't have money in my bank. I mean, that's there's a lot there to be confident in. So, yeah.
Such a simple thing. And I'm good at this shit, and I hadn't even thought of that. And it's like whatever you're looking for, you'll find. Like if you want to find all the negative things about Tim, you're gonna find a lot or whatever, right? And then I'm going somewhere with this. You're gonna find a lot, and you're gonna think negatively about yourself. But if you concentrate on all the positive things about yourself, and this is anybody, this is everybody, right? You're gonna find a lot of positive things and think positively about yourself. It's like the last time you were out and you came home. How many red cars did you see?
Yeah.
It's famous. No idea.
Yeah, no idea.
What if I told you I was going to give you $200 for every red car you see?
Mate, they'd be everywhere, mate.
Because you're looking for them, you know what I mean? It's like when your mate buys a new car or you buy a new car and you suddenly start seeing loads of them, that model of car. They were always there. You just weren't looking for
Yeah.
them because it wasn't in your head, because you didn't care, because you're trying to get on with your life. Like, we're capable of absorbing or all of our senses. It's something like, I should really learn these numbers because it's really great fact. It's like 20 million bits per second, but our brain's only capable of processing like 16, 20, not 16 million, just 16. So our brain's primary job is deletion advice. It's 90 odd percent of the information that we're capable of sensing. 80% of that comes through our eyes. That's why when you close your eyes to think. But yeah, it's meta. Like, see what I mean? I love this stuff. I've got all these, well, facts that I should actually learn so I can tell the exact numbers and stuff. But things like that is just so fascinating. So it's like, what you're going to focus on is what you're going to find, and then
Yes.
that's a positive thing. Things are going to be more positive. So like you, the hope, the internal hope. If people in situations like you tell me, please, but they'll be happy. Some of them, right? Like, even though the situation
Oh,
isn't
unbelievably
heaven level.
happy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's mad.
because yeah, in the last two, and I think this is where community comes in, like having a coach like Mark Tully is going to be critical, especially to some of these next points, because they'll help you realize that this is stuff that it's going in self-discovery, but the only way the work gets done is in community. It only gets done as we might see the most annoying pain in the ass person. They're actually there in your life to test and refine. It's the next test, right? Am I going to pass this test? And it's easy to be, and here it is, it's easy to be kind to somebody that's nice to be kind to, but kindness really is when there's a really good reason not to be. Generosity is not when it's easy. Generosity is when it's sacrificial and it hurts. All of these things that you're talking about are gonna actually, the true test is when it applies in community. And the fourth one is kindness, right? The fourth one is,
Right.
like, you actually now can't just be, I'm the victim, this is terrible things happen to me. You actually have to go out of your way, even when you feel like shit, even when the world is caving in on you, even when you don't think you can get out of bed, or you don't think you have to, find a way to do something kind for somebody else. And as we took them through this course, these were refugees living, that we, obviously given them some pretty good, homes that we'd built out of Besser blocks. They weren't tents that were falling down, but they were still in a foreign land, still, waiting to see if they could go home. And we gave them homework. You've got to put this into action. And we found out, we came back the next week to the course and we found out what they had done. We had two sets in one of the camps we'd built. We'd actually had like families from different ethnic backgrounds living in one kind of area. They backed onto each other. And usually in this sense, they wouldn't really be that friends in the normal world, but obviously they'd both gone through what they'd gone through and rallied together to support the school that we provided. Had people from all ethnic and religious backgrounds. It was quite an amazing place. It was beautiful. We discovered that this one group noticed that one of the other families on the other side had people with disabilities, a couple that needed disabilities. Well, what they did is they went and used their own resources and own money, and they built a concrete ramp into their home, because they had trades and skills for that person. And they could have used all that resources to make their homes a little bit better and a little bit nicer, but they saw the others that were in need in a worse condition and thought, we'll help them. We didn't ask them to do anything extravagant like that. We just said, find something. And they were put to the challenge, and honestly, we were blown away. Not only what they did made them feel pretty good about themselves, it transformed the whole relationship in that whole community. Suddenly, it was like that catalyst for just so much They started sharing electricity when it would go out, and water, because these were all things that were, just very limited and would run out from time to time. It was incredible. And the final thing was courage, and we would define courage as, if you're in a fight with Muhammad Ali, right? People think, well, the courage is Muhammad Ali. This guy, man, he's just fearless, right? He just has no fear. He just booms, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Well, actually, courage is the guy actually that will face Muhammad Ali, and when he gets knocked down, gets back up. And he might be shitting himself, but guess what? He's in the ring, and he has an ability to just be in the fight. And so often we think being courageous is, it's got to look like this, rather than it's just showing up and being in the fight. That is courage. And sometimes that's all we need to know, is just show up. It doesn't matter how you perform, just be there. And when we left Iraq, it was this, I look back at this moment, there's a photo of me standing with many of the families, and they'd loaded up their trucks, because guess what? It was about the same time that ISIS would actually finally pushed out of Iraq. So there was threats coming from another border in Iran, but ISIS had now been pushed out of the city of Mosul. And we were there throughout the campaign to liberate Mosul. And these families that had fled Mosul, that we took in from day one, that we were there, you know what? They were the first families to go back to their homes in Mosul and move back into their homes that were destroyed. They showed me pictures of their homes, like walls broken down, no windows. They went back, rebuilt their homes, and are living there to this day. And were the first to rebuild that city after ISIS left. There are still camps with 20,000 people all over northern Iraq, with families that were from Mosul still living in their camps that aren't able to go back for whatever reason.
Like the house is completely destroyed, or?
No, they don't have the courage. They're in the state where we've got provision here somehow. I don't know what I'm going to do. Can I make it? Am I going to be able to go back? They haven't processed the trauma they've gone through, so to go back to that place is too much for them. I'm not saying that everyone has to go back. What I'm saying, though, is when you apply these tools into your life, it builds your muscles. You are strong enough to be able to go back. And in going back, it's going forward, right? Like to go forwards, but even if it means you have to wrestle with some of those demons, you're strong enough. And when you wrestle with them and you beat them next time, holy shit, that's it. What's next? You're ready for the next challenge. And we saw it. The courage, I guess the thing I hold on to hope is our job was done when we left, even though we didn't choose to leave. Almost 1,000 people that were living in these places of refuge that we built were all gone. They were gone back now, and new families have come in and moved in from Syria and others so the work is obviously still needed in the region, and it's all run by locals. It's all run by the locals. We built them up, and that work still carries on. But that's how I know. And that was before I had to do the work myself and my own journey of wrestling through the PTSD now that I was going to face, the demons I was going to have to face. And it's still a journey for me today. And it will be for the rest of my life. But that I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Same here, mate. I wouldn't trade all the stuff that people would perceive as negative. I'm like, nah. I am grateful for all of that, 100%. But no, on you and your story, you just told us, empowering them people to help themselves. That is, in my eyes, it's one of the single most profound things that a human being can do for another human being. for sure. Because you're not doing anything for them in a sense that you are the thing that's helping them. You're teaching them to help themselves. You're showing them the path to help themselves, and then they are self-sufficient and they can go and rebuild their house after it's been destroyed by a terrorist group. And yeah, incredible, man. Well done. Well done.
And the cool thing is like I learned everything from them. Like I wasn't the teacher and they were the student, right? It was, I was figuring this out as we went along, and we had all the local leaders that have never known what life is like in their country without war and terror teach us. Like we were students, and I've had to, everything we've then done in our life since then. I'd say those 3.5 years were my education, and I've had to draw on that as much as it's also been an infliction of pain in my own way. To be honest, it's what has taught me as well.
There's no growth like growth through adversity, right?
Yeah.
That's where you learn the most. It's like failing. Failing's a fucking taboo, but it's actually the road to success. Get things wrong, learn. Get things wrong, learn. Get things wrong, learn. Success. But no, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing everything. It's been
joy.
I don't know if you noticed, but at the start I could hardly talk, so I was just like, wow, fuck. It was like just I even knew what you were going to talk about in your story already, but it's just the way you tell the story and put me right there, and the magnitude of everything, even though I've heard it before, it was just like, wow, this situation that you're in was incredible, and you chose to be there and go there and help those people, which is amazing. We've pretty much covered all the pillars of the podcast, which is real life situations. We went nice and deep, and we've had the reasons how got through it by using ourselves, using the strength from the supposed negative situation, and drawing on that for ourselves, and all the other things you mentioned, post-traumatic growth, which is really interesting. And there's another pillar that I'd like you to help me fulfill right now, and that's to promote yourself. Everyone who comes on the podcast gets the chance to big themselves up. Don't be shy. Tell everybody what you're doing just now, and I'll even have some links. So if there's things you want links to, announce them now, and I then send them to me, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Coach. Definitely jump on, follow. Just jump to my website, timothybuxton.com. It's probably the easiest place to just go and discover the things that I get up to. I really am passionate about inspiring organizations, teams, leaders with what it takes to be outrageously courageous. I believe it's the one thing in leadership. It's the one thing in our world today that's needed is leaders that are courageous, that lead with the heart, that do the right thing even when it's tough, and that do that for not self-interest, but for the benefit of others. And I would, if you have events, places of conferences, teamwork, that you really want to see that kind of leadership within your group or organization, I'd love to come and share some inspiring stories, some wisdom of waymakers, the people that have taught me throughout my 20 years of international humanitarian work, of what it takes to lead through crisis and see transformations take place in communities. You can also follow along with the nonprofit I lead, You Belong. There's ways you can come alongside us. Mark, you are a generous supporter of that work, and it inspires us to help waymakers that are refugees to integrate here in Australia and bring their richness to us. And with a good mutual friend of mine, I do some professional coaching as well, support more in performance, high performance coaching. So if you're operating at an elite level and you need to know what are the 1-2%ers in your life that you need to work on, I'll come alongside you with my good mate Mario and work alongside you, and I really want to work along with teams and athletics as well, ways in which you can get that cutting edge that's so needed And so if any of those are areas in which you're looking for help, looking for a way I can serve you, then definitely reach out at tim@timothybuxton.com. It's pretty simple.
Yep. Can confirm, by the way, Tim is a brilliant guy. Welcome him. Nice, warm gentleman. And he's an inspiration as well. And he really is a high performer himself. And Mario also too. I know him as well. And he's got such a outlook on life, such a drive and such a personality, and the energy he gives off is amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So I'll put the links.
He's the athletic.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely done
He does the ultras in the Kosciuszko Mountains and stuff, doesn't he? Does them in his sleep.
Yeah.
That's what I do them too, and then I wake up and I realize I'm still in my bed.
Yeah. Legend, Mark. Oh, this has been so much fun. Thank you.
This has been fantastic. I hope all the listeners have enjoyed, or watchers maybe, have enjoyed this episode. It's been very profound, even for myself, so I hope you find it the same way. Keep all the comments and all the interactions coming. That is incredible. It's moved more to DMs to myself, but I would really like if the comments would start coming back in. So please, if you're thinking that you got something to say about this episode, leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you're watching it. That would be amazing. And thank you very much for coming on, Tim. Appreciate you, and have a great month, everybody.
Yeah, go get it.
That's next month.